Hello and welcome to Education and Training. This podcast will assist with your understanding of how to read critically.
Firstly, we'll cover Raven, a tool for analysing the credibility of a source and its author. Secondly, we'll look at how an author can manipulate your thinking using surveys, statistics and opinions. We'll call this reading between the lines. We use the acronym RAVEN to analyse the reputation, the ability to see, the vested interest, the expertise, and the neutrality of a document. When you're looking at the reputation of an author, you're making a quick assessment of your existing knowledge of that individual and their past work. For example, does Jeremy Clarkson know anything about cars? Does Jeremy Clarkson know anything about prehistoric ecosystems? Does he have a reputation for stating facts or for wild exaggeration? The individual's ability to see is key when assessing the factual information you're provided with. If the document is analysing the effectiveness of partnering with host nation forces, are they reporting from there on the ground, or are they back in the UK? Are they basing their analysis on second-hand information from unreliable sources, or have they seen the evidence themselves? An author has a vested interest if they stand to make a gain or loss based on how they give out information. For example, a UKIP member talking about leaving Europe, an SNP member talking about independence, or the Israeli Prime Minister talking about the Iranian nuclear threat. Bear in mind that just because they have a vested interest, it doesn't mean their information should be discounted, just that you should take it into consideration. Expertise comes in two forms. Firstly, there are qualifications. You can check these by researching an individual. For example, if they're an academic, a search engine will normally give you a window into their background. If they're a career journalist, then you need to make an assessment based on their previous work. Have they spent 25 years reporting on the area they're writing about, or are they a generalist reporting on tube strikes one week and the Oscars the next? Finally, you look at the neutrality of the source. Have the life experiences of the author shaped their thinking in a certain way? A Chelsea Football Club fan reporting on the performances of Didier Drogba might see in these photos a striker trying to evade dangerous tackles. As a lifelong Manchester United fan, I would describe it at best as theatrical and at worst cheating. This is different to vested interest, as neither of us has any material gain to be had from describing it in a certain way. We're just affected by our allegiances. Another word for this lack of neutrality could be bias. When you do your Raven assessment, you must also be careful to not assume that the background information you find has had an impact on the writing. If an author is aware of their biases, declares their vested interests, and acknowledges the weaknesses in their ability to see, then you can still have a credible source on your hands. Raven is a checklist that you should use for all your research on CLM. Once you've got past the author, your next task is to be careful with their writing. Take this example. Which is better? No one in their right mind would put troops on the ground in Syria. Or 75% of people believe that putting troops on the ground in Syria is a bad idea. The majority of us instinctively would say the second. Why? Because it's supported by a statistic, and the first is just someone's opinion. But let's dig into it a little bit. The first thing you need to do is ask who was surveyed. The survey could have been these four miscreants on a Friday night out, more than a little worse for wear. If 3 out of 4 of them believe it's a bad idea, then you have your 75%. So we mustn't assume that the audience surveyed is a fair representation of society as a whole. The second thing we need to do is look at the question. You can do this by going and looking at the original survey, which often will be saved online. A simple Google search will find most surveys. On finding it, we see that the original question is in fact, should the UK wait until a formal UN resolution before deploying troops on the ground in Syria? 75% said yes and 25% said no. You can see from this question and response how the original statement can be said to be true, but now you can see that it's misleading. The survey question states that 75% of people surveyed believe it's a bad idea until there is a UN resolution, whereas the original statement implied, because that's how we first read it, that it would be a bad idea forever. Hopefully this has shown you how important it is to look at the source material for statistics that you are presented with, especially if you are going to use them to support your own arguments. If we go back to the original two statements, there is actually a useful fact amongst these two. See if you can spot it. Although what Lisa from Basingstoke has said is not factual, the fact is that she said it in the first place. Therefore, you'd be within your rights to use her opinion as evidence of public feeling on the issue. When you see an interview of Alex Salmond saying that the Scottish economy is strong enough to survive post-independence, the fact is not that Scotland has the ability to survive, the fact is he's presented that opinion. In summary, we have looked at Raven, a tool which analyses a source. Can you remember what it stands for? Reputation, ability to see, vested interest, expertise, and neutrality. Then we've looked at how we read between the lines of any statistics and facts that we're presented with. Always try to check the original question and the survey audience. You'll go into more detail in your Read Critically lessons, where you'll also get the chance to try putting Raven and your analytical skills into practice. I urge you to try and apply this type of thinking whenever you're presented with information by Facebook, politicians, newspapers, or even your ETS instructors. If you're a soldier who has any questions about what you've seen on this podcast, don't hesitate to get in touch with your local Army Education Centre. Thanks for watching.